Do you miss your grandmother?
I do actually, yeah, I do miss my grandmother. And my grandfather, particularly being in Windsor. For me, Windsor is her. Sometimes I'd come round and have a bit of tea with her because she had the best teas ever. So I used to get well.
You miss your grandmother. I do, I really do. I miss my grandmother and my grandfather too. And especially when I'm in Windsor, it hits differently. Windsor isn't just a place to me, it's a feeling, it's memory, it's warmth. Sometimes I'd come around and sit with her for a bit just to have tea because she honestly had the best tea you could ever drink. The kind of tea that didn't just taste good, it felt like comfort, like safety, like time slowed down for a moment. And that's why what happened next felt so jarring. Because grief is quiet, but power never is. Because on February 3, 2026, Buckingham Palace released a statement, just 2 short paragraphs. And those paragraphs didn't land like a normal update. They landed like a detonation. A depth charge. Across royal households, across legal circles, across private courtrooms and closed-door meetings, the same question started spreading in whispers. What did the Queen leave behind, and why did she leave it to him? According to that statement, one of the oldest and most enigmatic private estates connected to the monarchy had been passed down to Prince William. Not shared, not divided, not managed by committee, but placed under him as the single beneficiary. Not Sandringham, not Balmoral, not Windsor. Something older, something concealed, something Queen Elizabeth II had reportedly been guarding for years. And the moment certain people inside the palace realized what had happened, what had been moved, what had been locked away, what had been deliberately kept out of their reach, the atmosphere behind the gates reportedly turned ice cold. Because this wasn't just inheritance. It was a message, a final move, a queen's last unanswerable chess play. And at the center of it all was a name most people had never even heard spoken aloud. The Cedar Estate. Now, if you want to understand why this mattered, why it ignited anger, fear, and panic behind palace walls, you have to start at the beginning. Not 2026. 1944. The deadliest phase of World War II. Back then, Britain wasn't living in comfort. It was living under threat, air raids, uncertainty, the sense that history could collapse at any moment. And it was during that era, according to this narrative, that King George VI made a decision so discreet it was meant to disappear the moment it was made. He reportedly purchased an estate hidden deep within the Chiltern Hills, straddling the border between Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire. And from the moment it was acquired, it was designed to be invisible. No public announcement. No press photographs. No registry listing for the public to trace. No formal recognition anyone outside the tightest circle would ever see. For more than 80 years, the Cedar Estate was spoken of only in hushed tones by senior courtiers, a place that existed, but not officially. A property that was protected not with fences, but with silence. And that raises the real question, the question you should sit with before anything else. For 8 decades, why would the royal family keep a secret estate? What was inside it? What was attached to it that demanded that level of secrecy? According to internal briefing notes said to have circulated among members of the royal correspondence world, in the early hours of February 3, 2026, even seasoned royal historians were briefly stunned by what those documents described. Because the Cedar Estate wasn't simply land. It was reportedly a vault, a private chapel on the grounds, said to contain an engraved memorial crypt listing royal family members connected to wartime service. 186 oak trunks, not decorative pieces, but storage, containing wartime correspondence and private royal communications, sealed and preserved in archive vaults. 72 previously undisclosed royal images, including oil portraits of Princess Margaret and King George VI that the public had never seen. And perhaps most striking of all, according to this story, 14 sealed audio recordings said to capture Queen Elizabeth II speaking privately with figures like Charles de Gaulle, Ronald Reagan, Nelson Mandela, and even Winston Churchill. One veteran archaeologist tied to royal archival work described the entire collection with a sentence that stuck like a blade. This was not a museum. This was the raw architecture of royal memory. Not polished, not curated, not sanitized for public consumption. Just the crown, as it truly was behind closed doors. And here's where the story becomes even more serious. Because Prince William, according to the same narrative, wasn't some distant heir who stumbled into this by accident. He had been quietly visiting the Cedar estate on weekends between 2017 and 2021. Not as a ceremonial guest, not as a tourist, not for photographs. He walked the cedar groves with Queen Elizabeth II herself. He studied wartime correspondence. He reviewed naval messages. He personally helped catalog materials that had been sitting untouched foe. Our generations. Hundreds of letters from World War II soldiers were reportedly refiled by him. He even involved himself in practical work, such as improving the archive chamber's moisture control systems, because preservation isn't just about locking something away. It's about maintaining it so it survives. This wasn't about appearance. It was about stewardship. Stewardship by conviction. And within the covenant documents tied to this estate, a handwritten comment attributed to Queen Elizabeth II was reportedly discovered, a line that reframed the entire transfer. He will receive more than just the throne. The hush that kept it safe will pass to him. That wasn't poetry. That was instruction. That was a declaration. Because this estate was never meant to be handled like ordinary royal property. It was governed by something else entirely, a private framework described as a covenant trust, a legal stronghold built to protect the Cedar estate from institutional meddling. And if you want to understand how something like this could happen, you have to understand the structure, at least as this narrative presents it. The Cedar estate was not treated as part of the Crown estate. The Duchy of Cornwall, according to this story, did not have jurisdiction over it. Instead, it was governed by a private legal instrument, said to have been established in 2020, registered under a specific charter clause, and certified by a combination of formal authority, a notary tied to royal archival oversight, a constitutional advisor, and the Queen's personal solicitor. And inside that trust was a delayed activation clause, a trigger, designed to switch on only when two conditions were met. First, Prince William would be publicly recognized as the successor to institutional duty. Second, Queen Elizabeth II's state funeral would be concluded. By February 2026, both criteria were said to have been satisfied. And the palace statement, in a few calm words, confirmed the outcome. His Royal Highness Prince William, the Prince of Wales, will assume complete and sole care of the Cedar estate. Simple phrases, permanent consequences. Because the moment those words were read aloud, the story stopped being about inheritance and became about conflict. Because not everyone behind palace gates received this news with grace. Some people, according to multiple accounts referenced in the narrative, had been planning for years around a future where the Cedar estate wouldn't belong solely to William. And the names attached to those ambitions were Queen Camilla and her son Tom Parker Bowles. According to this storyline, for years they had been quietly, persistently, deliberately trying to gain influence over the Cedar estate's future. Camilla reportedly pushed internally from late 2024 for what she framed as a Windsor Cultural Legacy Center. The pitch sounded noble on the surface. Curated gourmet retreats celebrating British culinary tradition, literary salons emphasizing women in royal history, intimate heritage tour through cedar groves, all packaged as preservation, culture, and continuity. But beneath the surface, the goal wasn't simply legacy. It was control. And Tom Parker Bowles, in this narrative, saw something even more direct. He didn't see history. He saw revenue. He reportedly explored a plan built around converting the former hunting lodge into a high-end experience. Michelin-starred tasting concepts, branded artisan products, seasonal estate goods, honey, cheeses, wines, royal wild heritage packaging, and elite side events wrapped in the aesthetic of monarchy. It wasn't presented as exploitation. It was framed as heritage. But the mechanics, insiders alleged, were commercial. And then everything shifted on October 18, 2025, when a briefing memo was reportedly leaked. One suggesting the estate's wartime origins warranted cultural preservation status. Because if parts of the Cedar estate could be classified under public heritage law, it could weaken William's exclusive claim. It could open the door to collaborative management, shared stewardship, outside partnerships. A reclassification that looked respectable, but functioned like a wedge. And that's the question the script forces you to ask. Does that sound like protection of precious lineage? Or does it sound like heritage language being used as a mask for a takeover? In November 2025, Camilla reportedly hosted a private luncheon near Henley-on-Thames, inviting art historians, culinary reviewers, and heritage stakeholders. On paper, it looked like a celebration of rural sustainability. But attendees later described it differently. One guest reportedly called it a trial balloon, a test run for a public-private stewardship model that would divide management of the Cedar estate between Camilla's foundation and outside benefactors. Prince William learned about it, and he refused to participate firmly, but without theatrics. No public argument, no explosive head. Line, just a quiet, immovable no. And then, according to the narrative, he acted. Within weeks, he activated the Covenant Trust. 3 weeks later, the switch was thrown. The door closed. And the moment it closed, Camilla's belief that she already had the estate within reach collapsed. But here's the part many didn't expect. The Cedar estate wasn't the only battleground. A second transfer, one Camilla allegedly did not anticipate, quietly appeared in the land registry on January 31, 2026. North Hall, a sprawling historic estate, said in this narrative to be roughly 1,200 acres, stretching through rolling countryside in Berkshire and edging into parts of Wiltshire. During Queen Elizabeth II's reign, North Hall was described as a discreet royal hideaway, used for delicate diplomatic meetings, hunting weekends, and private conversations that could never happen under the glare of cameras. And it was also valuable, not just emotionally, strategically. Its legacy, its agricultural revenue, its unused licensing rights, all of it made it an asset with enormous potential. But the timing of the transfer is what made it truly shocking. According to this storyline, just weeks before her death on September 8, 2022, Queen Elizabeth II legally designated North Hall as a personal sovereign holding, not a joint crown estate asset. That one shift mattered, because it meant she could pass it privately through her will, outside the normal channels of institutional succession. And in a line reportedly written in an appendix, described here as Appendix R3, she left instructions that sounded less like a legal clause and more like a final act of guardianship. Let North Hall stay with the child who bears the burden of our future. Let it be a sanctuary rather than just a place to stay. In this account, King Charles III and Princess Anne were excluded from the decision, not out of malice, but out of strategy. Like a stone dropped into still water at midnight, the ripples moved instantly and silently. Palace archivists, according to the narrative, claimed that during the codicil signing, only 2 living witnesses were present: the Queen's legal advisor and Lady Sarah Chatto. And on the outside of the sealed envelope, 3 words were reportedly written, words that sounded like a warning to anyone who thought they could reshape the Queen's intentions after she was gone. For the reign after me. But Camilla, according to this story, had not been idle. By 2023, she and Tom Parker Bowles were allegedly pushing to include North Hall in a Royal Culinary Heritage project. Publicly, it was marketed as farm-to-table renewal. Privately, leaked documents allegedly suggested backing from a Paris-based venture capital group and wealthy UAE investors. The proposal reportedly included a heritage cookery school, a 5-star boutique hotel, and a full rebranding of the estate as a polished Windsor destination. And a commercial feasibility analysis, dated July 2025 in this narrative, claimed North Hall's licensing rights alone could be worth over $48 million across 10 years. One anonymous courtier, speaking in the tone of someone who had watched too many quiet wars inside gilded walls, allegedly described it like this: Camilla thought she could soften the estate out of the Queen's hands, even from the afterlife. But Queen Elizabeth II outwitted her. And then the story introduces another name, the person portrayed as Camilla's longtime fixer, someone with a reputation for managing whispers and back channels. Maurice Lillo. According to the narrative, he spearheaded a campaign not of open confrontation, but of pressure, the kind that doesn't leave fingerprints. In late 2025, anonymous think pieces began surfacing arguing the monarchy needed to rebalance generational equity, claiming too many heritage assets were being concentrated. And then Tom Parker Bowles, in this account, made a last-ditch attempt, a lease inquiry into a southern orchard tract of North Hall, arguing it was undeveloped agricultural land and citing inheritance protections. But Duchy legal staff reportedly rejected it quickly. And Camilla's reaction in November 2025, according to palace sources, wasn't described as ordinary anger. Not hot, not loud, something colder. A kind of rage that comes from being outflanked, not by a rival in the room, but by a dead woman's plan that you can't undo. And that brings us to what the script presents as the most intimate covenant of all. Clarence Hill. In mid-January 2026, inside Windsor's Oak Room, Princess Anne reportedly examined Queen Elizabeth II's personal letters with almost forensic focus. And she discovered a codicil unlike anything the family had seen, folded 3 times, enclosed in a leather folio, marked in a way that suggested it was meant to reach one person only. William. Clarence Hill, as described here, sits miles from any major road, reachable only by a secluded, discreet driveway hidden inside the chilt. Erne Hills. An off-the-books reserve for direct heirs, reportedly acquired by King George VI in 1947. Shielded from Parliament, protected from public scrutiny, kept separate from the flow of royal funds. Clear, straightforward, purposefully personal. And the Queen's instruction, written in her own hand, carried the weight of something beyond property. I give my grandson, Prince William, the complete title and spirit of Clarence Hill, free from shadow or burden. Let it stay out of the Crown estate, unaffected by scandal or politics. This land is not a commodity, it is a covenant. That phrase, immune to scandal, wasn't accidental. Because in this narrative, the Queen had grown increasingly cautious about public disputes, fractured loyalty, and the way certain family conflicts had begun to stain the institution itself. Prince Andrew's controversies, Prince Harry's media storms, the way rumor, money, and disorder could distort everything the crown tried to represent. Queen Elizabeth II, according to this story, believed her legacy required more than tradition. It required moral protection, a space free from rumor, free from commercial hunger, free from the chaos that could be weaponized, a sanctuary not just of land, but of principle. And that, in the script's framing, is why Clarence Hill mattered so much. Because it was meant to anchor the moral line of succession, the compass that William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, would carry forward. By the time the dust settled inside the palace walls, one truth became impossible to ignore. What the world had just witnessed was not simply inheritance. It was strategy, decades in the making. For years, Queen Elizabeth II quietly watched the tides shifting inside the monarchy, ambitions rising, alliances forming, influence being traded in polite rooms where voices stayed calm but intentions were sharp. And in her final acts, she ensured that the royal board would fall exactly where she wanted it. The estates, the trusts, the sealed letters, the hidden clauses, they were never just about land. They were about the future of the crown. By placing these holdings into Prince William's hands, she wasn't simply rewarding loyalty. She was securing continuity. She was blocking interference. She was drawing lines no one could cross. And while tensions reportedly simmered behind palace gates, one thing was clear. The Queen's final move had already been made, and there was no reversing it. Now, with Catherine standing beside the future king, the responsibility of protecting that legacy rests with the next generation, not just as heirs, but as guardians of what was deliberately preserved. But in a world like this, where tradition and power and secrecy are braided together so tightly you can't tell where one ends and the other begins, one question still lingers in the shadows. Was this truly the end of the Queen's master plan? Or was it only the beginning of something much larger? If you want to uncover more hidden stories from inside the royal family, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and stay with us, because the next chapter is always closer than you think.